What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to We the People podcast. My name is Brett Maurer. I'm the host of this podcast. So, obviously, we have had quite an interesting uh, change in the political realm and political science in the last couple months or so here. And for those who don't keep up with the news or anything like that, there was an election. The election decided that the incumbent, Donald Trump, would no longer be the president of the United States. Instead, he would be replaced with the now named president, Joseph R. Biden. The inauguration for now President Biden occurred yesterday, and I have had a lot of people in my life asking me questions about what exactly the whole transition of power is all about, and like what are the different steps and components. I know some people have been learning kind of some of the cool little secrets that not a ton of people know about. So I just kind of wanted to go through that today. That's going to be pretty much the focus of this podcast. I want to talk about what typically happens in a transition, what are the little steps and things like that. And then I want to discuss what didn't happen with this inauguration, because as many of you know, we are in a pandemic. So the inauguration this year was very different from what it usually looks like. Not to mention, some things did change on behalf of the former president when it came to what is expected of a president, and what is expected of them to contribute to the inauguration and the transition of power. So I want to start with talking about what exactly happens after the election. So after the election, the final electoral college votes have to go to a vote in Congress in order to be certified. So obviously, we saw this on January 6th. This is when the Congress voted to accept and certify the electoral college votes. The vote did come after a violent insurrection occurred at the Capitol building. But nonetheless, we got the vote through our Senate, through the democratic process, and the democratic process and our constitutional system was able to endure. So then, after that, so between January 6th and yesterday, January 20th, there is then a period when the incoming president, so the successor, is not yet inaugurated, but they are, or at least should be, beginning the transition of power. This is what we call the lame duck period. Basically, what that means is during this period, the leaving administration, so in this case, the Trump administration, and the president-elect, so in this case, the now current president, Joseph Biden, this is when they would typically arrange meetings to kind of meet in person. Sometimes they tour the White House. They discuss different foreign leaders and how they kind of interact with them. They arrange different meetings to kind of basically work together the last few weeks, so that when the leaving office steps away, the successor can hit the ground running with the presidency. Now, this was something that we've seen for presidents going way, way, way back. Going all the way back even to Thomas Jefferson. There was always a peaceful transfer of power, going all the way back to the days of Thomas Jefferson. It was a little different when Jefferson took office because John Adams was unhappy that he lost, and therefore he skipped the inauguration. He really was not involved with the power transition in many aspects. But nonetheless, it is still something that has continued to occur since then. And the last time that we actually saw this occur was when former President Barack Obama was helping the now former president Donald Trump in transitioning into the office of the White House. We did see televised press briefings with the two of them. They held meetings to help carry Trump into the office somewhat with ease. But we did not see that in this election. What we saw in this election was the now former president said that he pretty much would not concede to a peaceful transfer of power, and that he was refusing to accept the election results until the insurrection at the Capitol building occurred and Congress certified those votes, and then he had no choice but to concede the election. So what is something else that's interesting that a lot of people may not know is that the presidential transition of power began kind of rather earlier. The transition of power actually began in early May as required by the 1963 Presidential Transition Act. This basically was the act that said the presidential administration is required to establish a White House Transition Coordinating Council. So when you hear on the news that they're talking about, the transition cabinet, basically, this is what they're referring to. So we do know that President Trump, former President Trump, did not have this transition party. He did not put one together because, like I said, he was refusing to concede the election and basically was saying that I'm not leaving office, so I don't need a transition party. But nonetheless, he has been removed from the White House now. The new acting president is in the White House. He has already began what will be his 4-year term, should he be allowed to complete all 4 years. And that was without a transition team. Typically, like I said, this is a process that would start in May. So this is a process that would start long before the election even happens. And basically what this council would do is they would start, basically setting up itineraries, getting different documents and things put together so that everything can basically be handed off and, everything is smooth sailing from there on out for whoever is coming in. So then after that, moving forward, obviously there's an election, then there's a certification. Then we have the lame duck period. And the lame duck period is basically kind of when a president goes through, the way I want to say it is something like, it's their final period, obviously, in office, but it's, in many cases, when we see presidents that are leaving office really try to get some last-minute actions in place. So this is when we see a lot of presidents signing executive orders in, things like that, in hopes that they can get whatever they were unable to in the last 4 years put in place before they're out. So basically, the other thing that happens during this lame duck period is there's the issuance of last minute pardons and executive orders, like I just mentioned. And we did see that Trump took advantage of this lame duck period, as most presidents have in the past, and signed quite a few of the kind of last minute pardons. Basically, we saw in the either the night before or the 2 nights prior, we see that Donald Trump filled out about 74, I believe, presidential pardons, and he commuted the sentences of 70 others in this form. So basically, the president took advantage of a period and a right that he has as the president to pardon about 143 people, I think is what I read. It may be 144. I want to say this was Tuesday night. And on his list was included his former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, and his former fundraiser for his campaign, Elliot Brody. So, this is, once again, a right that the presidents have during the lame duck period to issue last minute pardons, executive orders, things like that. So moving on from there, there's the election, the certification of votes. Obviously, by this point, you would hope there's a transition team in place. After the votes are certified, or even sometimes after the election, typically what the president will do is the president will, give the incoming party, incoming president a phone call or some kind of contact like that, and it basically invite them to the White House to be a part of this transition. And that's really when the actual steps of the transition begin. And then once the votes are certified, we enter the lame duck period. So this is something that we did see in 2016. Actually, I think it was not too long after the election, even before the votes were certified, former President Barack Obama made a statement from the Rose Garden when he invited, informing everyone that he invited the now former President Trump to come to the White House and join him. This also happened in 2008. Obama mentioned that he was following kind of the image of the Bush Jr. administration that had helped him with this very process also. Basically, this phase of the process, this period when the transition kind of starts after the election, or when at least the incoming president is invited, typically and ideally starts right after the election. So this is roughly a 72-ish day, kind of transition period that would end with the inauguration. And during this time, the transition team would, help to handle the influx of different campaign staff, because obviously now you have new people mixing with old people in the White House staff. So the old staff kind of tries to help organize them, tell them what they're going to be doing, train them, things like that. And basically they just help them, kind of get the personnel into the daily operations and functions of the White House and the presidential staff. Some really important things that happen during this phase, during this transition phase, is that a lot of the staffing of the office and the cabinet kind of occurs in this period. This is when incoming presidents will start to decide who they want in their cabinet if they have not done so, start to kind of announce who those figures are going to be, in hopes of getting them quickly approved and put into place by Congress, so that obviously our government can run smoothly. So this is a really important part of the transition, filling and staffing the office of the president, deploying the agency review teams, in order to kind of get the staff in the understanding of what needs to be done with these different agencies. This is also the time when we see, kind of the building of the incoming president's management and policy agendas. This is when they kind of start to lay the foundations for how they want to run their time as president. And even schedules will start to get built at this point. A lot of foreign dignitaries have meetings that are lined up with the president, or we have meetings lined up with them that are set in the future, and you may no longer be the president by the time those meetings roll around. And this is a very true thing. And obviously, if you are not someone that would agree with those foreign dignitaries, or vice versa, sometimes those meetings get canceled or things like that. So this is when we kind of see not only the staff and the policies of the office being laid out, but also the president's schedule for what may be either the rest of the year or even the next 4 years. And this is also the point when the incoming president would typically start to identify what the kind of necessary talents and characteristics and things are, that they will need in not only themselves but their staff in order to execute what they feel are the priorities of their office. So like I mentioned, there is now a point when we will start to see the president kind of releasing, I want to say, their appointments or their hopeful appointments on who will fill their cabinet. Typically what happens, unless the president intends to keep a cabinet member from the previous administration, is the president and cabinet secretaries basically fill out and submit a resignation that will take effect on Inauguration Day of whoever the incoming president is. This is true for all high-level secretaries and cabinet members. The deputy secretaries also have to tender a resignation, but they are most of the time requested to stay on in some form of an acting capacity until a new secretary is confirmed by the Senate. Just because, once again, if you've been in a job for 4 years and somebody is coming to take your place, especially when it's a thing like government, you want it to run as smoothly as possible. So if you're able to, you keep some members of a former staff or an older staff on to help, kind of train and supervise and facilitate the actions and duties of that office or that cabinet position. Another thing I want to mention is, the president doesn't just have to nominate or fill their cabinet positions. There are so many other positions the president has to fill. There's over, I believe the number is like 4,000 government positions that the president has to either nominate someone for or appoint someone for. I think only about 1,000 or 1,200, something like that, of these required positions require Senate confirmation. So this is typically the president's cabinet when we see the cabinet hearings on the news and things like that. This includes, if need be, Supreme Court justices. They are the kind of government positions that require Senate approval before they can be filled. And basically what happens is the transition team kind of tends to vet cabinet level disputes early on, and this is the point in when they want to start doing that. And they also want to start doing the same thing with White House personnel. So they figure out what the key disputes are, who the key White House personnel is going to be. They try to, figure all that information out and hash it out. Some of these important positions that you would hear about on the news would include, deputy secretaries, obviously higher level secretaries like the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Education. These are people that have to have Senate approval. And there are positions that serve at the pleasure of the president, but these do not need Senate approval. The other thing that is important for them to look at is the operational and kind of logistical support for what is going to occur. Basically, the transition team of the incoming president will give operational and logistical support months before the inauguration to the current administration of the White House. And basically it's, kind of a training period. And basically what they do is they assist in, office spaces and human resources, communications, IT support. They may even work in the congressional space. Some of them may do like some kind of outreach work, set up different things for the incoming president to attend. And basically what they do is they help to develop what the infrastructure for this cabinet is going to be. What the legal infrastructure is going to look like, what the game plan's going to kind of be. And they also, while developing this legal infrastructure, they kind of include different things in it. And some of these things could be basically what they want to help the president get started once they are inaugurated. And so basically this is kind of the point when we see the initial few days in office, there may be some executive orders that are released. And this is basically what happens during this early part of the transition. The administration and their team start to form what they want these executive orders to look like, in hopes that they can get them into approval as law later on. Basically, there's a whole handful of things that an outgoing administration should do in order to ensure a kind of peaceful transition of this power. And this role is set in kind of the idea of cooperation, so that, important information, especially with the seat of government that the presidency is, you have all this pressing national security information and intelligence information and issues that arise with that. Basically, there's this process so that the information can be carried over and not lost or things like that. The Bush-Obama transition period has widely been discussed by political scientists and experts as basically being one of the greatest transition periods that has ever occurred. It was kind of the pinnacle of how cooperation should occur between an outgoing and incoming presidential party. President Bush, in this instance, is credited with being basically the kind of figurehead, the spearhead of this process. He really did a fantastic job with trying to assist Obama as he and his administration came into the White House. And he really did a great job with assisting in whatever was needed, and giving his knowledge and his staff's knowledge and resources for whatever was needed. And there's also requirements for the different agencies of the federal government. Most of them have to develop, like I've already discussed, these agency review teams. And then they usually set up some form of transition teams of their own, these kind of transition leaders. And then there's also aid from career employees to identify, different issues or concerns that are maybe making their way in with the incoming administration's agency heads or staffing. And they really want to do this because you don't want a cabinet to be filled with staffers that's going to fail within the first few days of an office. You want these agencies to be ready and able on day one after the inauguration. So, quick review, there's the election. There's typically, at that point after the election, an invitation for the transition to begin, for the incoming president to start to meet with the current president or the outgoing president and get their transition teams working together. Cabinet positions start to be thought about, start to be filled, or at least mentioned, so that when they are inaugurated, there can be an appointment. These transition teams start working closely together. The president and incoming president may start to meet and hold press conferences and start going over basically the logistics of what it is to be president. And it's important, all of this information that they're getting, because, like I said, the incoming president is going to have to fill as many of the 4,000 government positions that are open. And like I said, some of these are required to get Senate confirmation. And like I said, the transition, at least the part that we see, starts the day after the election. So November 9th, transition begins, or at least that's when it's supposed to. But in reality, it really starts far, far earlier in May, when transition teams are formed, and there may even start to be meetings between these transition teams in the event that the opposing candidate should win the election. Basically, the transition teams are there to start working together, and if an election doesn't pan out, then okay, well, we learned. We have that information. It really does take a long time, and this is something that I really want to bring up, because I know that the former president now got a lot of slack for this, and I can't really excuse some of his actions, because as now he has left office, the Trump administration still did not fill all of those government positions and cabinet positions. In fact, the president's cabinet wasn't even full. But in defense of his first few days or first month or so, it is a lot of positions to fill. Most presidents take months to fill all of these vacancies. In the first month or two, most administrations, including the Reagan administration, the Clinton administration, only fill maybe a few hundred seats. Now, I can't really justify the Trump administration because after 4 years, not all of these seats were filled. Not even close. In fact, like I said, not even all of the cabinet positions were filled. But in defense of his first few months, I know that there were people talking about, oh, well, he doesn't even have this position filled or this position filled. Well, it does take a long time. And it does take a long time for those spots to even get approved by the Senate sometimes. But yeah, it definitely, for not just current administrations, but previous administrations, going even back to the presidency of Kennedy, it takes months upon months to fill these vacancies in the government. And then, like I said, the agency review teams would start to kind of form during this process, and they would start to kind of work together and figure out what needs to be done, what do we feel hasn't been done very well, and where do we go from here. So now fast forward to Inauguration Day. I want to start by talking about the funding for transition and the inauguration. So somebody may be asking, who pays for the transition? Well, the transition is typically paid for from a combination of different federal and private fundings. The GSA provides quite a bit of candidates provides quite a bit of space for both the candidates during an election for offices and things like that. And before the election, not only will they give this space, but they will give office equipment, different technology and furniture and things so that candidates can run campaigns. They have even also been known to supply the security staffing for these campaigns. So then after an election occurs, the GSA typically has a budget. And the budget for the GSA back in 2016 for the pre-election transition activities, so this is when the different review teams and things start to meet, there is allocated in the budget back in 2016 $13 million for that. And then to pay for staffing, the presidential transitions are granted to set up tax-exempt organizations to fundraise. So part of their campaign funds go to staffing these transitions. They are only allowed, and these are the laws for everybody. They're only allowed to accept $5,000 per person or organization, and are required to disclose all donations no later than February 19th. And this goes for any election year. There were some issues with this during the Trump campaign, and to this day we still do not have the fully disclosed list of who some of the donors were, and this is why there's so much conspiracy and question as to whether he was receiving illegal funding from foreign dignitaries or outside governments, which is against U.S. policy for elections. Just to give you a figure, Mitt Romney, when he ran against former President Barack Obama, raised nearly $4 million just for his transition team. This is a similar figure to what Obama raised. So basically, the GSA and the funding that the candidates raised during their campaign continue to pay for the staffing, for traveling, to accommodate guests, things like that during this process. So then moving on to the actual inauguration. So we've gotten through all of the fluff, all of the background crap that happens. Everything gets approved, and here we are on January 20th. According to the 20th Amendment in the Constitution, it is specified that each elected president of the United States begins at noon on January 20th. And this will be obviously in the year following the election. That means their presidency does not end until noon of January 20th of the following 4 years after an election. So, basically, what this means is you have all of these festivities that start to begin, and there's the swearing in process and things like that. And then as of noon, there is a new president. And then after that, there's a whole list of things that will happen. So basically what happens, and there's a whole list of different things that occur, like different events and things like that. It starts off with typically the president, and this is not required, but typically what happens is the president makes an address. This is typically their kind of final address to the nation. And then one of the secret little hidden things in an inauguration that many don't know about is that the incumbent president, or the outgoing president in this case, will leave a letter. Basically, this letter typically wishes luck, words of encouragement, maybe compliments on the transition, things like that, to the president who will be receiving the White House once they leave. Then the different political members start to arrive at the Capitol, where the actual inauguration ceremony is held. Typically, there is large crowds of people. There are very large crowds of people typically at these. These are similar to, I can only really compare them to concerts. That is really what the crowds look like. As for the political figures that show up, this is typically members of Congress, so the House and the Senate members. Supreme Court justices will come, and typically what is expected is the former presidents and first ladies will come and attend as kind of a showing of good faith and things like that. This has occurred for generations, for decades going back. And we saw something very different this year. The first time that there was an inauguration in presidential history where the candidate took the oath of office while the outgoing president was not in attendance was the inauguration in 1801, when Thomas Jefferson took the office from John Adams. John Adams refused to attend the inauguration. And we saw that again this year. Donald Trump refused to attend the inauguration, and in fact, he boarded Air Force One for the first time, for the last time, and flew home to the state of Florida long before the inauguration even began. But typically what will happen is political figures begin to arrive. The incoming president typically gives some form of address as he leaves his home state or hometown however you want to view it. Um, and basically, thanks them for their support and, being the place that raised them or that has housed them and their families for so long. Um, this is something that goes even all the way back to former President Abraham Lincoln on his way to D.C. to accept the White House. He also did a small kind of rally to thank the people in his town and basically say, I won't forget you when I go into office. So once again, that happened this year. Joe Biden made an address and then left home and headed for Washington, where he would then enter the Capitol building with his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, and would later on accept the presidency and take the oath of office. So right there, we've already seen some big differences. The incumbent president did not attend the inauguration of the incoming president. The letter that was left by Donald Trump for President Biden was not the typical letter that is left by presidents. Typically, that letter is very encouraging, very hopeful, things like that. The letter that was left this election, or this inauguration rather, was something more of a pat on the back for himself, rather than, words of encouragement or, you will run this country smoothly, I have faith in it, things like that. Also, something we saw different was not all of the living former presidents were able to attend. The only living former president and first lady that did not attend was the Carter family. Former President Jimmy Carter did speak with now President Biden and wish him luck and give him words of encouragement. But due to the pandemic and his increasing age, they were very worried about being obviously in what was still a somewhat large crowd for an inauguration. After everyone has arrived, typically what will happen is the military presents the flags of the nation. This includes the military branch flags as well as the American flag. The national anthem will be performed. There will be a few different sermons and prayers that are given. There may be some other guest performances of different American hymns. And then the vice president and the president take the oath of office. And then typically there's a big kind of reception. Not really a reception. It's more everybody just stands around and they talk and they thank each other and they wish each other luck. And, it's this big thing where reporters get to meet these officials and officials get to meet each other sometimes for the first time. And it's just a really cool moment to see all of these different people that we consider to be famous figures all in one spot. After that, there's a typically kind of ceremonial goodbye. Basically, what will happen is the vice president and former vice president will, speak briefly or however, and then they will descend the stairs of the Capitol building together, and the former president will leave the premise, leaving the current vice president. And then the same thing typically happens with the president. There's typically a big kind of goodbye for them at the White House before they head to the Capitol building. And then at the Capitol building, there is another goodbye where there's this kind of ceremonial moment of the current and former president walking down the stairs together, and the former president leaves the premise, leaving the current president the power of government. After that, there's typically another small reception. Typically, a banquet of some kind is set up in the Capitol building the now president, after the inauguration, would go into what is known as the president's signing room, and they would sign basically the official paper saying that I'm accepting the oath of office to be, whatever number president they are, and uphold the Constitution. After the signing period and the reception, then there is a parade in which the president is taken from the Capitol building to the White House, and may stop and greet different civilians and things on the sides of the road. They may greet reporters, other political figures that may be there. Then typically what happens after that is, after arriving at the White House, they will then once again meet the former presidential family. Typically, we see a kind of customary gift exchange between the incoming and outgoing presidential families. They will go into the White House together. Basically, this is kind of a small, kind of housewarming tour kind of moment. And then for the last time, the presidential family will leave the White House. The former presidential family will leave the White House, leaving the presidential family there. And then typically what happens after that is there are one or two, sometimes even more than that, inaugural balls, when political figures, even foreign political figures, the press, even sometimes civilians, are invited to basically party and celebrate. And this is typically, there's guest performances and things like that at these. And this was a very different inauguration from what we're used to. We obviously did not have large crowds. There was a large crowd, but it was mostly made up of political figures and their spouses or their husbands or whoever. And there was still guest performances. The military was still there presenting arms and the flags and things like that. But we did not have large civilian crowds. The parade was very similar. There were not large crowds at the parade. Obviously the president's family was not there to greet the incoming president. There was no, gift exchange, things like that. And the other thing is there was no inaugural ball. Instead, this year there was a televised event of different performances from across the country by musical celebrities and Broadway stars and things like that. And then there was a large firework display. But nonetheless, it was a celebratory event that, once again, here we are, 46 presidents later, and our country is still going strong and growing and, thriving as a democracy in our modern world that was very different than what it is now back in the early 1790s. And so, yeah, that's basically the inauguration and the whole process behind it. I know it's a lot. I really, really was trying to make this a shorter video, but there's just so much to unpack when it comes to a presidential inauguration and transition of power. And, there's kind of little tidbits that not everybody picks up on. Not everybody knows about the president leaving letters to the incoming president. What a lot of people don't know is that the White House staff will typically be allowed to kind of leave their mark on the White House in a way. There was this common joke that there was a drawer in the White House that Joe Biden had left his name and chapstick in. And that was a joke actually referencing what one of those little fun tidbit facts is. The fact is that White House staffers tend to sign their name on this. There's a drawer in the White House or a couple drawers in the White House where White House staff will actually sign their names, and this has gone back for many administrations. And so it's kind of a fun thing for, administrations to come. They can see all of these names of White House staffers that have come and gone and things like that. And even presidents will kind of leave their mark in the White House in different ways. Either some through renovations, some do sign pieces of furniture. It has happened in the past. Or some leave possessions in the White House that kind of become these, joked about symbols, but they're held as kind of like a treasure because it was an object belonging to a former president or whoever. So thanks everybody for tuning into this video. I know it was a long one. I'm going to try and start making some shorter content just because I've had a couple people that have asked for it. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and let us know if you want any form of specific content to continue to come out. We are going to be releasing another video here soon, within the next day or two. This video will cover Guy Fawkes and the failed gunpowder plot in the early 1600s against the English Parliament. So it's going to be our first video that does not pertain to U.S. politics or history. Exciting stuff. Make sure you tune in. Everybody stay safe. Everybody stay healthy. I hope everybody continues to have a great rest of their week and enjoy the next few days of the beginnings of a new presidency.